Okay, so I want to talk about this topic because it touches on some things that I'm interested in, like sexual harassment allegations and what happens when those are brought up and how men fucking suck. Okay. All of the not all men people are gonna come at me for this, but I don't fucking care at this point, right? This isn't really a video about Braxophone, but it is a video about what I think his apology post today kind of exemplifies. Okay, let's talk about what he's apologizing for. Tectone's ex, Pinky Chew, Pink filed a protective order against him because I believe she felt she was in danger of, him stalking her, something along those lines, right? And so he actually went to court and he was found guilty of sexual assault, gaslighting, and harassment. So when this was made public a while back, apparently, obviously the usual shit happened, right? And Tectone, being Tectone, continued to shit on Pink, continued to be an absolute asshole to Pink. Today, I found out about a lot of this, right? Because somebody had retweeted, so it showed up on my timeline, Brax's apology. And I have a few issues with Brax's apology. Okay. I have many issues actually with Brax's apology, but I want to not only talk about Brax, it's not just him. The problem is what I think his apology demonstrates about how men like Tectone can continue to get away with shit like this because of other men. Yes, they approved the protective order because he probably did all those things. Yeah, because it is a civil complaint, right? Not a criminal one, because criminal ones have to be done by a prosecutor, but civil complaints, like, they're still lawsuits. They're still like legal things. They're just held to a different standard, right? Because there are two types of law. So some people will tell you he wasn't found to be criminally guilty of anything, as if to make it seem better. Don't believe them. Don't think about that, because they are just using language to confuse you. It's still legally, he's held legally liable. He's still found to be guilty of those things according to the standards of civil law. But ultimately, like, he was still found guilty. She was given a protective order. And here out comes Brax's apology, right? Spoiler, he sided with the asshole. I had watched recently Anthony Gramuglia, I think that's how you pronounce his name, video about apologies and why some apologies work and why some don't, right? And he was talking about the anime men and basically how, like, certain apologies are made that are sincere and you can actually move forward and improve, and you have to show that. You have to show your growth. And those apologies count for something. It also helps if you don't do anything criminal, right? But other apologies come off very, shallow. And then he kind of investigate a little bit of why, right? And then so when this apology came out, I feel like my brain was extra primed to be like, wondering what is going on in this apology, like what's really being said, right? Like, is it just placating words? And it kind of is. So I want to talk about what's wrong with this apology, why it focuses on the wrong things, how it perpetuates and demonstrates like a toxic masculine brotherhood, like within the patriarchy, that really is harmful to victims of sexual assault or harassment and whatnot, right? And why men need to be better. Restraining orders and protective orders are actually really hard to get. They also don't do anything useful. Your favorite apology is Lugong's apology from the link click live action. Oh my god, wait, tell me about that. He does such a good job apologizing for manipulating and using offering remuneration. Yes, what Anthony said was, there are certain things you need to do in a proper apology for it to be sincere, right? You have to acknowledge that you harmed somebody. You have to express actual regret over it. You have to acknowledge what harm you did to them. And then you have to actually take steps to improve. You have to do something about it. He starts off with, TLDR, I've read the court documents and formed my own opinion on the matter. Okay. The reason he says this at the beginning, giving context, is because I think he's responding to a clip that's been going around in which somebody had brought up that he defends Tectone in his chat. And his response was, I'm waiting for the court documents before I make my decision. But he continues on. I'm not going to show the video. You can find it pretty easily, but he continues on. And here's what he says in the video. He says, I know Pink. And I know she's got some mental issues. So I wouldn't be surprised if she lied and made this all up. And then he said that Tectone has talked to him, and Tectone told him that, he was going to give him the information, but he was going to let him decide, what to believe. And he felt that that was really good of him and very nice of him. And he said that Tectone seemed so assured that he was, that he had done nothing wrong, that it has to count for something. And I am just like, you are a fucking moron. Very rarely are allegations made up. Very, very rarely. And just because your bro was nice enough to say that you get to make the decision whether or not you believe him while giving you information from his point of view, that doesn't mean he's actually giving you room to make an informed decision. What he's doing is gently guiding you towards his interpretation of events or the interpretation he wants you to have. Sorry, that got me heated. You can see why I wanted to talk about this. Then he says, even though Tectone helped me while I was going through difficult times, knowing now what has come to light about him, I do not want someone like him in my life, and I don't want to be associated with him. I apologize for any unfair assumptions I made about Pink, and I hope she gets the justice and healing she deserves. And then he has a break here because this is basically the cover, and then the rest of it is the in-depth stuff. But look at the cover. I apologize for any unfair assumptions I made about Pink. I don't like how that's phrased. Okay. The use of the any is vague, non-specific. It is literally a modifier that indicates non-specificity. You know what assumptions you made because you're responding to this only because people are passing that clip around. It's already off to a bad start, right? Not very sincere. It's hard to convince a judge to pass protective order, Brax. She didn't lie. Yeah, she did not lie. Yeah, most women or victims don't go to court. The reason being that going through the legal system can re-traumatize them. It can be really awful. And the way that they're treated by the people defending their offenders is awful. If she is going so far as to go to court, she is not fucking lying. It's very unlikely. I'm sorry that you're upset apology, pretty much. So then we continue. Okay, so now this is the long part. When someone approaches you during a low point and offers a hand, most of the time you take it, especially if that person's worst crimes you knew of were, quote, disagreeing with others, unquote. I confided in Tectone because in a space full of fake-ass people trying to do whatever they can for clout and money, he felt like a very genuine person to me and extended his hand. For what it's worth, I think I really needed that because I struggled with finding real people who wouldn't lie to me or dodge me if my YouTube, Twitch views didn't line up with theirs, especially since COVID. YouTube especially is a very lonely job. So you can see what I have a problem with right here. He's making this about himself. He is already leading in with an excuse for why he was so attached to Tectone. He's making this about him, not about what he did, not about the victim and how he hurt them. And that, right, again, is one of the points that needs to be covered in an apology, okay? You don't censor yourself. Toxic top make himself sympathetic and reliable to a vulnerable bottom in a crisis. Pretty much. You know what? Yes, in BL terms, that is true. A toxic top made himself seem sympathetic and reliable to a vulnerable bottom in a crisis, right? And that's what abusers do. That's what people like Tectone do to plenty of other people. But that does not work as an excuse for you to then treat the people that they don't like shit. You gotta stop reading problematic BLs. Listen, I can't, okay? They're all problematic. I would have to give up BL, and I can't. From there, even though we weren't super close friends, I always felt like he was one of the few creator friends I had met who had my back. And whenever he was wrapped up in a controversy, parentheses, before he started grifting hard, close parentheses, I always chalked it up to Twitter being full of people who need other people to make decisions for them. Parentheses, which is still true. There's a ton of very loud people like that, but obviously not everyone. Close parentheses. And he was always good at explaining his thought process. Okay, he is in this paragraph doing a couple of things that are very manipulative, and that's why I don't give him the benefit of the doubt. First, he is slightly distancing himself from Tectone. We weren't super close friends, right? And yet he immediately believed Pink was lying, okay? And then he said, in parentheses, there still exists very loud people on Twitter who need other people to make decisions for them, blah, blah, blah. Why? Why do you need to include that? Like, he has this problem where he does not want to acknowledge that he's wrong in any way. That's the fucking problem. He doesn't want to acknowledge that there could be a different perspective, right? That he was wrong about. He wants to spin this as if he was just manipulated into this. And he also says an insane thing. He says, he was always good at explaining his thought process. I have listened to Tectone's rants. That's how I decided he was a piece of shit. That man is incoherent. Having a super hard time trusting Brax's vibe check, seriously. I stopped hanging out with him, pretty much full stop, a bit after the Charlie Kirk incident, because after that, he went full extremist right-wing grift mode. I can be friends with people who have differing political opinions, but when things get extreme, I'm not as good at handling it. He defended this man. While knowing apparently nothing about him or being deliberately ignorant. Tectone has demonstrated multiple times before Charlie Kirk died that he is racist, a misogynist. He is an awful human being. He has been right-wing or leaning for a while. By the way, Utterly Noah, I think, has a great video out about like Tectone and his history. Honest guys don't grift hard. Brax, please. I know, right? Adults should understand that people are complex and don't make judgments solely based on vibe checks. Here's the thing. It's not really relevant, but it is somewhat relevant. Atsu's big thing with Tectone was because he realized that Tectone was kind of a different person on his, like, in public than he was in their private chats. He was, like, super nice in their chats, but then he would be, like, an asshole, in other places. And I think Brax is an idiot for not noticing the same thing. To some degree, I wonder if, because when Brax released the whole Atsu thing, Tectone jumped on that, right? Tectone jumped on that so that he could ride his coattails and say, see, Atsu is a bad person, thus aligning himself with good, right? Even though he's also a shit person. I wouldn't be surprised if that's why, Tectone reached out to him and whatnot. And Brax is a moron for not catching on to that happening, especially if he's complaining about people who are being fake. I think it's important to somewhat note that the people that he thinks are fake are people who dodged me if my YouTube, Twitch views didn't line up with theirs. Brax has an inferiority complex. He wants validation. Inferiority complex is interesting, where a lot of toxic masculinity comes from. Exactly, it is. Because the patriarchal model of masculinity is unachievable. And all men have an inferiority complex as a result of that. They are trying to live up to that standard. And they don't even realize that that's what's harmful about it. Like, patriarchy hurts men too. Then he goes on. While I had heard things about Pink, even if I didn't think too much of it since it wasn't my business, those impressions still stuck with me. It's not a secret that most streamers and YouTubers who have made it big in the past 5 to 10 years of struggle with some sort of depression, anxiety, or have something else going on with them. In my case, it was ADHD, anxiety, and depression. The rest of the industry surrounding CCs also usually struggles with mental health. It's not an excuse, but it is a contributor to why some people act certain ways. I just took his word for how his relationship with Pink was, since they were together for a time. I also wasn't aware of Tectone's schizophrenia, which apparently was public, but I just never really went looking for it. Okay. Let's blame mental illness. Tectone beating his wife, Brax, not my business. Exactly, right? So you immediately see he's turning a blind eye, right? And he doesn't see that that's a problem. He sees that as an excuse because he cares more about the opinion of this man than this woman who has allegations against him. He also, in this, is blaming his impression that her mental illness would make her lie on her possibly having a mental illness. One that he does not identify. One that he has no idea whether or not she has. Then he continues to talk about mental illness to imply that his own mental illness made him act this way, which is, again, just an excuse, right? Whether or not he's saying that mental illness possibly would make her lie or did make him side with Tectone, both are problematic. Both are not an excuse. You can't armchair diagnose someone and then assume that they're lying because you think they have that condition. I probably shouldn't have taken his word for it. I'm trying not to be sarcastic while reading, but I can't help that one. But I also didn't really think there was a reason for him to lie to me about it, especially given the fact that there was no trial or case or anything like that at the time. Either way, that was a poor judgment on my part. That's the most that he admits to, is he made one poor judgment. What the fuck do you mean I didn't think there was a reason for him to lie to me. Do you think Tectone would go around bragging to a content creator he beats his partner? What do you mean? He's acting as if Tectone has nothing to gain from this. He's so fucking dumb. At this point, he's kind of just an idiot if he thinks like this is making him look good in any way. Oh, bro, lying to me? No way. I know. I don't even know how to properly describe how I'm feeling right now. Okay, and so this part, he has forgotten about Pink. It's now about him and Tectone. Now about their toxic BL. Pissed, sad, disgusted, kind of just feels like all of the above. It sucks to have someone you thought was a good person, putting on an act online, actually just turn out to be someone with multiple masks. It sucks to put your trust in someone who had your back for so long and find out that they're not the person you thought they were. I'm disappointed. I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm disgusted. And I'm sorry. I didn't think I was going to be this angry, like reading it out loud, but I am. So he's made it all about himself. This sentence doesn't even make sense. Someone you thought was a good person putting on an act online actually just turned out to be someone with multiple masks. You're describing somebody who is fake, and then you're surprised that they're more fake than you thought. This isn't an apology. This is just his self-defense. It really is. You know, he just said, and I'm sorry, right? Do you want to see the next sentence? It says, I'm not sorry. I didn't immediately choose a side. So right after his I'm sorry, he says, I'm not sorry. His non-specific I'm sorry, immediately into I'm not sorry. He told me, this is like the Danish deception lady. He told me he had a gambling addiction, so I added him to my credit card. Yeah. I don't know, like, what is so attractive about Tectone to him? Like, wow, this BL is toxic. He says, I'm not sorry I didn't immediately choose a side. And this is a problem that I have in general, right? Where a lot of people will say, well, both of them seem bad or whatever, or I'm not picking a side. Okay. If you are, especially, you have a connection to one of them, you are friends with one of them, right? You should pick a side and you should look into it. Because the thing is, it's the same as just saying it's not my business, right? And then you allow abuse to happen. The things that have been said about Pink and the things that are being alleged against Tectone, they're not equal things. That's why I don't like when people say Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni are both bad people, so we shouldn't care about this. I'm like, okay, you think she is a mean girl, and she's accusing him of sexual harassment and retaliation. Those are not equal. They're not on equal terms at all. You can't just brush your hands of it, right? And say like, it doesn't matter because they're both bad people. No. People told you about this. Tectone was your friend. You defended him. And you didn't bother to look into it at all, waiting for legal documents. I'm not sorry I ignored the problem until it blew up on me. Yeah, pretty much. I'm not sorry I didn't immediately choose a side because I still believe the right thing to have done was to wait until the documents were out to make an unbiased decision. Except, remember the clip where he said that he wouldn't be surprised if Pink was lying, and he thinks that Tectone wouldn't have any reason to lie to him. He's not unbiased. But I'm sorry to Pink for making assumptions about her, and I'm sorry to my audience because I never had any intention of hurting or betraying any of you guys. But after reading through everything, not taking a side in this and choosing not to comment on it for the most part definitely wasn't harmless. Yeah, name the harm. Name the harm. He does not. And it likely hurt a lot of you guys for me to remain friends with him until now. So I'm sorry your feelings were hurt. I've made the decision to cut him out of my life going forward. I've also messaged Pink privately to apologize. I don't know that there's much else to say. He spent 7 paragraphs talking about how it was so sad that he was manipulated, barely mentioning Pink, but he thinks there's not much else to say. There's a clip going around of me mentioning Pink's mental health issues, saying it's possible she lied in court, and then saying I want to wait until the documents come out. I'm not even that big of a creator or anything, so I don't think it's going to get that big, but just know if you see it, that was me before reading over the case. I don't care. You never should have said that. He accused her of lying on record. That's a felony. Sure sound like we went into reading the court documents super biased, right? That does not represent my current thoughts, and it was a poor judgment on my part. I shouldn't have let the fact that Tectone was previously a good friend to me obstruct my vision. Again, I still believe waiting for the documents was the right thing to do. Stop defending yourself. Just stop. I don't particularly think Ms. Kiff is the best person to be sourcing information like that from, especially given the situation he's in with Emmy. Okay, so because that's not even relevant. He was basically, you know what he's saying here? And again, this is where I think, again, this whole tribalism is a problem. And how men like Brax are probably not even aware, but they only believe men. This apology could have been 3 sentences, right? It could have been an email. Or whatever, a text, sorry, could have been a text. So he says, I don't think Ms. Kiff is the best person to be sourcing information like that from. What about Pink herself? Why is he thinking Tectone says he didn't do it, and I trust him more than I trust this other guy, so I'm going to believe him? Why are you comparing what these two guys said? Why are you not thinking about what Pink said? I don't think that he's aware that he's basically implying here that, well, another man that I do respect didn't come forward and say that, Tectone was a bad guy, so I thought it would be all right to believe Tectone. Like, that's basically what he's saying. But implying there was even a possibility of Pink lying goes to show how much I didn't want to believe Tectone did something so horrible despite the writing being on the wall. Only men's voices matter, pretty much. This apology, that's how he ended it. He focused so much more on himself than the people he harmed. He never acknowledges what harm he did. He barely acknowledges, the act itself. It's very disingenuous. He tries to minimize his involvement by downplaying what he knew about Tectone. And yet somehow he reveals that he knew the writing was on the wall. There are contradictions throughout because this is fake, because this is so disingenuous, because he's trying to say what will please or placate his audience. He's not making this apology out of any real sense of shame. I've already talked about how, if you look at this, I think it's a great example of how patriarchy has men. Within the patriarchy, men are just jerking each other off, right? They're just trying to get other men to jerk them off too. They are just constantly trying to live up to a standard for other men. It's because of that, right? That Brax is only looking at what Ms. Kiff and Tectone are saying and not looking at Pink's allegations, not looking at her on her terms. And in fact, he immediately assumes that because she has mental health issues, that she would lie. Despite having anxiety himself, it also shows how easy it is for men to turn a blind eye. This is why I don't trust a man who doesn't cut out his friends who are like this. You can't say that's not your business. You're not safe to be around if that's what you think. And because these men don't listen to women, that's another reason it's so important for men to call out other men, to look into them when these allegations are made. Because if they don't, nobody will listen to the woman. This is why it's important for men not to speak on the behalf of women necessarily, for them, but to speak when they can't, to say something to support them. Because otherwise, you look like an idiot like Brax. And it also shows that Brax doesn't understand abuse dynamics. He doesn't understand how abusers will go full Darvo. The reason that he ended up thinking that Pink was the problem is because Tectone laid it all out for him. Because Tectone's version of the story is Darvo, probably. Tectone's version of the story is she abused me. It's incredible. He is an adult man, supposedly did not catch on to any of that. All because he wanted this male validation so bad that he refused to even entertain the idea that this guy who is an asshole publicly could also be an asshole privately. I think it's just a good case study. It's a good case study of why this is a real issue, of why we need to care about when women bring up allegations, when anyone brings up these allegations, and why we need to actually look into them rather than just believing a man when he says, I didn't do it. And how easy it is to believe a man. We need to really think about how easy it is that people usually will doubt a woman first. Why? Why is that, right? Why do you care more about if the man's life is ruined over allegations? Because it never actually is. There's not actually an example of a man whose life was ruined by an allegation, true or not. At least not very many. If you notice people like Brax, yeah, you should be calling them out. If you notice people like Tectone, you should be calling them out because this is ridiculous. You don't understand how stupid you look. Wild he doesn't get abuse dynamics when he was almost in a toxic BL as a bottom.